Hello, Internet. It's time for another Wednesday's Serial. I'm going to talk about a couple comics that came out this week, new stuff to just kind of give first impressions. Ja! First up is Hell Yeah, which sounds like it's knocking off Kick-Ass, but not really at all. It's kind of like in inverse, I guess. Heard an interview, apparently this guy was working on it forever, but that doesn't really come through. The main idea is like the idea of superheroes or superhumans happened a long time ago. Kind of first came up during the Gulf War. A lot of them came out and then they just started doing good for the world. And this is all prologue. And then we meet a character. So Benjamin Day is the son of the guy who led all of this, and he's just a punk kid, and he dresses like some sort of weird biker guy from out of Akira or something. It's weird. But he lives in this world of like normalized superheroes, so everything's gotten used to the idea of superheroes, and they mentioned briefly that like sports and movies kind of died for a while, because how do they cope with the idea of the fantastic being banal, I guess. Although that doesn't even quite make sense, so whatever. And there's a lot of these ideas kind of quickly brought up and dropped and never really explored. The character's just this punk kid who's like, I don't like... He doesn't even have a motivation, per se. He's just kind of acting out to the fact that everyone's always expected so much from him, but nothing more than that, which is flimsy. And then it throws in other characters, and then at the very end it throws in something else, then it throws in something about the parents not being who you expect them to be, and there's something about a barcode on the back of his neck, and this is the comic. It's just ideas, and to give you a frame of reference where I'm coming from, why I think this isn't good, and this isn't a good way of doing storytelling for any kind of medium, is actually I heard something that framed it really well for myself recently, which was not really an interview, but Ira Glass, if you know, the host of This American Life, great radio show, if you're into that kind of thing. He pointed a camera at himself and talked about storytelling, and a lot of stuff was more pertinent to radio storytelling or getting a great story for the radio, which is all well and good. But the point that he got to that I think was really apt for anything is a really great story can have like a really great idea and a really good execution. Unless you get both, it doesn't work. And part of what makes the execution work that this book fails to do is you bring up a lot of questions and then you answer a lot of questions. If you go too far without answering any questions, your reader feels lost and it's murky, and it's just like they don't know what's going on, so why should they care? If you answer too much right away, it's just kind of like, okay, well, nothing new, right? Like, or if questions basically answer themselves. Like, part of what makes it a story isn't necessarily that it's unexpected, but that the questions still need to be answered. You still need to see the story play out. So, yeah, this issue did none of that. Maybe this will read better later. I'm really feeling with a lot of this stuff, and I keep saying this, I notice. It might read better in the trade, but until it's there, I can't even say anything except... what's the point? What's the point of reading this book? You're just going to be left in a sea of nothing with no defined characters and no real story. Next up, Age of Apocalypse, and after all the stuff with X-Force and whatnot, I had to give it a shot. And I've also read the old Age of Apocalypse retroactively, and read a bit of Exiles, which played off of some of the characters, but whether or not that's going to be a factor, I really don't think that's going to be a factor in this. Though I will say Exiles is a much better book than this. I just wasn't too impressed. There's a lot to be said for the Age of Apocalypse, and they've come back to it a lot, especially more recently. And the core concept of Age of Apocalypse is, yes, this idea of Apocalypse rising up and then the mutants coming up and this stronger world coming to war. Now that they have an Apocalypse that's a Wolverine, I don't know, that just feels weird. You have this mutant resistance cell, and then you kind of have the humans fighting. And then, really what it comes down to is, despite all the factors with the mutants that you care about, because those are the characters, it's really about this war between mutants and humans, and this idea of difference actually leading to war, which is exactly what a lot of the earlier and better X-Men comics are about, is avoiding exactly that. And then seeing it come to fruition, seeing it play out is interesting, but because they have so many wrinkles with Apocalypse and all of that, and then how all these mutant resistance cells are doing other things and not really playing it like a sympathetic side, but more like a completely rogue side, not accepted at all, it kills that, like, core idea, and it really detracts from what it could be. Like, on top of being an awesome war comic, essentially, like the superhuman versus human war, where all the characters you know and love are on one side, but the idea of humanity, where you should relate to, is on another. Like, playing off that could make a really interesting story, but they're abandoning that, and any semblance of that, it feels like, in this issue. They're really creating it to be so, like, war's messy, obviously, but who you feel like you're fighting shouldn't be necessarily, and because you're getting so many stories and so many bits from all these different sides, it's a bit much to tackle. And also, I've read most, I'm not sure if all, but most things related to Age of Apocalypse, and reading this book, I'm lost again. It's very murky. They're throwing a lot at you. Also, the art is very murky itself, which helped reinforce that, which is unfortunate. It's not that it's bad and I could grow to like it. There's some characters who I knew they were once they started talking, but looking at them initially, I couldn't pick them out. And that didn't help anything. If you're a big fan of the whole Age of Apocalypse thing, I mean, definitely check this out. They have the Daredevil version of the character in there, which was kind of cool, and kind of see how they played him. And it's one cool thing about Age of Apocalypse is you get to see some of your favorite heroes twisted, and if they were playing the villain, that's kind of a fun take. But that also was done in a series called Mutant X a while ago, which was a different X-Men alternate universe offspring thing, and from the few issues I read of that, it felt like that was played a bit more interesting because it kept it more focused. Yeah. So there you go. So my question of the week to all you comic people is Avengers versus X-Men. Are you excited for it? Do you think you're going to pick it up? Do you think you're going to pick it up in issues? Do you think you're going to pick up everything, just the main books? Like, are you interested in this at all? I'm curious, let me know, because I'm on the fence. I hate to say it, but it's the bit of me that is still a complete and utter fanboy is really curious. So, hate to admit it, but yeah. Also, are any of you picking up the Watchmen books, which is kind of DC's event? Not really, but the way they're marketing it is. Any of you picking up any of those, all of those? Are you guys approaching that at all? I'd be curious to hear about that. I'm dodging it, not because I care about them ruining the old Watchmen story, because, don't get me wrong, Watchmen's a good comic. Clearly, it did a lot of interesting things, not only as a story and the perspective of superheroes, and also ushering kind of a tone, clearly, though it was not the only book to do so, no matter what anyone else says. There was a movement, and it was a big part of that movement, but it was not the only book. I just didn't think it was so great, and I don't really have any interest in these prequels. It's not that I'm worried about them detracting from the main story, like I said. It's not that I'm thinking that they don't necessarily even have something to add. It's just that I really don't care. I mean, all the characters in Watchmen, none of them were really characters that I care to revisit. Like, they were great within the book, obviously, but on their own with people who are pretty far away from the mindset. I mean, just it's been so long. I mean, you can't be in the mindset of Watchmen because part of what created Watchmen was this tone of the times. That's part of it. And that's part of what makes the movie so interesting, is because it comes from a completely different tone, though a similar idea. But it's a take on a different kind of threat, metatextually, and so that comparison is interesting. But to have these characters, they're moving forward with it, and those characters, I'd be interested. But because they're prequels, no interest. So, yeah, but let me know, again, what you guys think. And then hit like buttons, comment. It would be kind of cool to see if I could get a few more views. You know, whatever. Death threats, yeah, put those below. Peace.